Okay, I'm just going to go over how to set up a original blueprint. Before, what we did was we kind of looked at the character one, and we've just changed a few things in that, a few options, and switched a few flipbooks around. But if we go to our blueprints folder here on the left hand side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make a new folder called platforms. So we're going to make a kind of floating platform that moves up and down. In the course of your game, you might have like different types of platforms. So again, it might be a good idea to put them in a single folder under your blueprints. Again, you can color that if you wish. Just make mine green. And then to create a blueprint, all you have to do is right click and go to blueprint class. And there's a few kinds of blueprints here that you're presented with. There's actually loads of different classes, okay? But these are the main ones. So you've kind of got like an actor, which is kind of probably the main one that we'll be using throughout this series. We've got a pawn, character, player, controller, game mode, actor component, scene component. But we're just going to go for actor component. You can see here it's got a bit of a description. An actor is an object that can be placed or spawned in a world. So that's kind of perfect for what we want. And I'm just going to type in moving platform for this and double click it. So when you double click it, you're brought into the blueprint section for this here blueprint. We've got like a viewport. It doesn't have anything in it. It's got this ball in it, which is just a default scene writ. If you press play or anything like that, this actually won't be present in that game. We've got our construction script, so this is anything that you want to script that doesn't happen in game but can happen in the editor. I'll probably do another video on that. It's a cool feature where you could have like a single sprite and then you could pull out from that and it'll just automatically duplicate depending on how far this widget is that you created. But it all happens in the editor. And then once you press play, this construction script node kind of is irrelevant. It doesn't do anything after that. The main part though is our event graph, and I'll have a few kind of nodes set up for you already. So this is kind of where all the scripting is going to take place. And anybody that's ever used Unity and made a new script, you always present it with like update and awake functions. And Unreal is kind of the same, so it's got like an event begin play, which is our awake, and then it's got like an actor begin overlap, so this is if it overlaps with anything, and then it's got this event tick, which is basically update. Okay, for this here we're probably just going to use event begin play, which is going to be the easiest one. Back to our viewport, we can add in loads of different components here. Okay, so we could add in like sprites, audio, geometry, cameras, collisions, that type of thing. But for now, all I want to do is go to my sprite folder. I'm just going to go to my scene one, and I'm just going to add in 3 sprites. I'm going to pick these here 3. So add in 1, 2, and 3. If you added in 1, you could probably just right click and duplicate if you wanted to as well. Make sure that you're snapped to 32, and what I'm going to do is grab the second sprite here, move that to the left, and grab the third one and move that to the right. So here we go. So here we have our platform that we're going to use. Actually, I'll probably just duplicate this one and move that over. Name wise, it doesn't matter too much right now what you name these, but you could just name them like sprite 1, 2, and 3. They could be sitting under the, like you can see here that they're kind of parented to this default scene writ. So wherever that moves, all these here will move. Or like you could pick one of these sprites and drag them up, and it'll like parent to that one. Then it's up to what you want to do. But I just like to leave it as a default here. Remember, when you press play, this circle or sphere isn't going to be present. So if we go into our event graph, what we want to do is, so once the level starts, once we begin play, we kind of want to start this animation where our platform moves up, and then after that maybe sits there for like a second and then moves down and does the same over and over and over again. And we can kind of do that animation in our blueprints by adding in the timeline. So we can add in new nodes just by right clicking, and we can search them here at the top, or you can try and find them in this maze of hidden menus. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in a timeline. So I'm just going to right click and add in timeline. And I'll just call this movement. So when we event begin play, we just want to play that. And you see this becomes highlighted now. So that's just us connecting up the node. So if I press simulate here, you can see that that's kicking off. It's actually not in the scene. But we've got no animation tied to this, and really this animation could be tied to a lot of attributes for the blueprint, so it doesn't even know what this is going to affect. Okay, it doesn't know what it's going to update at all. So we're going to double click on our timeline first, and we've got a few tracks that we can add in. We can add in a float track, a vector track, an event track, and a color track. What I want to do is just add in a float track, and I'll just call this movement again, just so that in our event graph we've got this movement node now, okay, but it's actually doing nothing. So you can see I've got my movement template up here. It doesn't have any keyframes. To add in a keyframe, you just hold down shift and you click, and it'll make one wherever your cursor was. I'm just going to make this more specific and put in the time as 0 and the value is 0. And then a second later, I'm going to move it up. Okay, so I'll make the time 1 and the value 10. I'll do that. You can see that kind of shoots away off. I got these two buttons here, they kind of fit them in horizontally and vertically. So I'm going to shoot that off to there, and then I'm going to, after a second again, bring that down to 0. So that's 2 and 0. So it's going from 0 in 0 seconds, 1 second it's at 10, and then in 2 seconds it's at 2. This might be too much, but I can come in and change that. So I want to set this on 0 for maybe another second, so I'm just going to go to 3. So 3 seconds, and I'll leave that at 0. And then I want it to move down, okay, so instead of going plus this time, I'm going to go to the 4th second. So 4, and I'll put in minus 10. And then again at 5. So 5 seconds is going to be back to 0. And we kind of want to hold that for a second, so I'm going to go to the 6th second and keep that at 0 as well. Now you'll notice that it's going from this light gray to dark gray. That's kind of telling you that this timeline is only lasting 5 seconds. Up here I can switch it to 6 seconds. Another thing is, this curve isn't very smooth, it's very angular, so the acceleration and deceleration is going to be kind of stiff looking. So what I want to do is grab all those nodes, right click, and just use auto. Okay, that will automatically kind of average them out. So now we've got our movement track set up. What we want to do is apply that to some attribute for this blueprint. So if I right click here and type in offset, under transformation I've got add actor local offset. So if I click on that, I can connect this update node to here, and then I've got this delta location. Okay, now the problem with this delta location is it's containing our X, Y, and Z values all together in one. But what I can actually do is I can right click this and split the struct pin. Okay, so it'll split it into its X, Y, and Z values. Now in Unreal 4, you mightn't have noticed, but the Z value, okay, there's a Z direction, is actually up and down, and our Y is our depth. Okay, so just remember that. So we want our platform to move up and down, so we want to connect this movement, okay, to the Z. So basically what's going to happen is our event begin play is going to start playing this movement track, okay, which is going to update this add actor local offset, and it's going to update it by using these values coming from the movement track. So what's going to happen is it's going to start to slowly move incrementally until it's at its peak here. So every frame it's going to move 10 units. And then it's slowly going to stop there, and then down here it's going to reach 0. So for these frames here it's not going to move. In actual fact, if you look, it probably will move slightly because these widgets here aren't vertical, or sorry, horizontal. So I just want to move them so they're more horizontal. So to test this out, we're going to compile. It's not going to work perfectly right now, but if I go to my blueprints in the platforms, what I can do is I'm just going to place this in our scene. Again, you're probably going to have to change the Y location to 0. And I'll move it here. So if I play from selected viewport, you'll see that it's probably moving too fast. Comes back down, and it only plays once. So we've got two issues. It's moving too fast, and it's only playing the once. So what we probably should do is go back into our timeline and change our values that are 10 and minus 10 to maybe 1 and minus 1. And I'm going to play from a new editor window. You can see that it's moving now. Probably too small, so I'll change that value to maybe 3 and 3. Play again. That should be minus 3. So compile and play that. Now, it's not looping. We can easily fix that by changing the loop value here. So just ticking that on. So if I press play now, it should start to loop continuously. Slight issue where it's not looping. Okay. Compile and save that. Just seeing if it works from play start. Okay, so that seems to work now. So it might have been that I didn't save it, or that you should have it from play from start. Another thing is that you've seen that I was kind of having to go in here and change these values quite a bit, which can kind of get a bit annoying after a while, and that means for each platform that you put in, they're going to move exactly the same distance, and we can kind of tweak that a bit. I'm going to bring these values back down to 0, okay? Or back down to 1, so, or 1 and minus 1. So it's not going to move that much now. So if I compile and save this and press play, see, it's not going to move that much up or down. But what I can do is, if I go back out to my event graph, I can kind of set up a variable that I can make public. Okay, so if I click here, I can add a variable, and I'll call this platform distance. Okay, at the minute it's set to a boolean, so this is like a true or false value. Your variables can be like integers, which are kind of whole numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They can be floats, so like anything between 1 and 2, so 1.1, 1.2, and so on and so forth. Here are the variable types, so you can even have names, bytes, strings, vectors, transform, controllers. So all these here are different integers or variables that we can use. And I'm going to make this a float. You can probably see as well that these here values that we're using are colored in a certain way. So these here ones are all kind of bright green, and these are floats because you can see that they're using like decimal points, so 0.0. So that's what a float would be. If they were kind of like this teal color, it would mean that they're integers, they want to use whole numbers. So I'm going to change this to a float. You can see down here these are red, and they would correlate to like a boolean, so they're true or false, you know, like should I do this, yes or no type of thing. So what I want to do is I want to bring this here in, okay, I want to get it, okay, I don't want to set it, so I want to just get the value. And another thing I want to do is I want to make it public. By making it public, I'm just going to compile and save it here. When I'm out in my editor, you can see that I've got platform distance, and I can change the value of this, which is pretty cool. So what I want to do is maybe multiply this movement number by my platform distance, which I can set out in my editor. So if I pull this out and I just type in multiply, you can see that I can get a float multiply. It looks like a star. So float multiply by float. So what I want to do is I want to multiply this value, not by typing in a value there, but plugging in this variable. And instead of this movement track going straight into my delta location Z, I'm just going to plug this in. At the minute this is 0, so if I press play, it probably won't move. But if I go out to my editor, I can change this platform distance to say 3 and press play, and now it'll move 3 times the value of that movement track. And I could duplicate this and have this one set to 1. So they're going to move at different speeds. So this here one's set to 3 and this here one's set to 1. So that's how to set up a basic blueprint. There's a lot more operators in there that you can use, such as like divide and different types of variables as well. Kind of stuff that we'll be going over soon enough, especially when we start to add in new animations for our character, like jumps, and when we start adding in projectiles, that type of thing.